Hello, dear viewer. A warm welcome to this literary journey. Prepare to immerse yourself in a story that transcends time, yet pulses with eternal truths about dignity, true love, and the courage to be who we truly are. This is the narrative of Katerina Eugenia, a young aristocrat deemed unsuitable for having too much conscience in a world that valued obedience over integrity. What if what your family considers your greatest flaw was, in fact, your greatest treasure? And what if the rejection that hurts the most was, in reality, the door to the life you always deserved? In this story, you will discover that sometimes we need to be scorned by those who do not deserve us to be found by those who truly value us. In times when so many of us feel displaced, misunderstood, or too different, this 1845 narrative reminds us, never dim your light to fit into small spaces. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching us from? Leave your city in the comments. I love knowing that our stories travel to so many beautiful places. And don't forget, if this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Every gesture from you helps us continue bringing narratives that feed the soul. Now take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let yourself be transported. Year 1845. Location Paraíba Valley, province of Rio de Janeiro, Imperial Brazil. The red wax seal sealed more than just a letter. It sealed a destiny. When the messenger dressed in green and gold livery arrived at the Alvarenga Manor that Thursday in March, he carried with him the Albuquerque coat of arms, a rampant lion surrounded by coffee branches. The wax was still warm to the touch, as if holding the heat of the hands that had closed it. Baron Augusto de Vasconcelos y Mendonça received the letter in his jacaranda-paneled office. Through the tall windows, the afternoon light filtered through velvet curtains, drawing golden stripes on the Persian rug. The air smelled of imported cigars and the sweet perfume of roses that the Baroness insisted on keeping in every room, as if they could disguise the property's other, less noble scents. His fingers accustomed to holding the reins of a coffee empire and signing contracts that decided lives, broke the seal with the slowness of someone savoring a moment. The calligraphy he found was impeccable, each letter formed with the precision of one educated in the finest colleges of Coimbra. Your Excellency, Baron of Alvarenga. As his eyes scanned the lines, his expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief, then to something that looked dangerously like delight. It was not common for a man of his standing to experience genuine surprise. Aristocratic life was, above all, predictable. But this letter was extraordinary. Alexandre Henrique de Albuquerque, Viscount of Campos Novos, one of the most coveted matches in the entire empire, was formally asking for the hand of one of his daughters in marriage. The proposed dowry was generous, 50 conto de rei, properties in Lisbon, and the veiled promise of an elevation of the family's title. After all, everyone knew that Emperor Dom Pedro II himself was the Viscount's godfather. It was the kind of alliance aristocratic families dreamed of on sleepless nights, planning ascensions and securing lineages. But there was one detail that turned the extraordinary into the absolutely unbelievable. The Viscount specifically asked for Lady Katerina Eugenia. The Baron reread the name 3 times, making sure his eyes were not deceiving him. Then he did something he rarely did. He laughed. A loud, harsh laugh that echoed off the walls lined with portraits of stern ancestors. He summoned his wife and 2 eldest daughters to his study. Baroness Leonore arrived with her perpetual rustle of taffeta, her face already composed in the mask of interest she wore for family matters. Mariana Beatriz and Cecilia Adelaide followed her like swans behind their mother, graceful, impeccable, exactly as they should be. When the Baron read the name aloud, the ensuing silence was so thick it seemed to have texture. Then, like shattering crystal, the laughter erupted. "Katerina?" Mariana Beatriz brought a gloved hand to her mouth, her blue eyes wide with genuine shock. The Viscount of Campos Novos asked for Katerina. Cecilia Adelaide, always more restrained, merely adjusted the frills of her dress, but a cruel smile danced on her lips. He cannot truly know her. If he knew of her eccentricities, he would surely choose another. The Baroness took the letter from her husband's hands, her narrow eyes scanning every word as if searching for hidden traps. When she finished, a venomous satisfaction lit up her face. "This," she said slowly, "is providential." And it was. Because Katerina Eugenia de Vasconcelos y Mendonça was not just the 3rd daughter, the least beautiful, the least talented in the arts that mattered in the salons. She was, in the words often whispered by the Baroness in moments of frustration, a walking disgrace. Her history of scandals had begun early. At 13, during a soirée at the imperial court, she had publicly argued with a deputy about the morality of slavery. Citing French and English philosophers, with a fluency that left everyone stunned and horrified. A young lady did not have opinions on politics. A young lady certainly did not express them in public. At 17, she had been seen distributing food and medicine to the enslaved people of neighboring properties during a yellow fever epidemic, not from a distance with gloves and a handkerchief to her nose, as charitable ladies did. No. Katerina had entered the slave quarters, soiled her silk dresses, held feverish hands, cleaned wounds. The scandal had lasted for months. 6 months before this letter, she had committed what the family considered her gravest sin. She had intercepted the sale of an enslaved family that was to be separated. A mother of 3 children sold to a plantation in the north, far from her children. Katerina had used her own savings, saved from birthday gifts over the years, to buy them. And then, in an act that nearly caused the Baroness to collapse, she had immediately freed them all. The Baron had needed to intervene politically, use favors, distribute discreet bribes to hush up the incident. "She is a stain on this name," the Baron said now, slamming the letter on the mahogany desk. "A woman with ideas above her station. The Viscount does not know what he is getting into." "But we do," the Baroness smiled, and there was something sharp in that smile. "And we will say nothing." The plan formed right there, in that fragrant office, as the afternoon sun cast ever longer shadows. They would accept the proposal immediately. They would prepare Katerina for the engagement, with strict instructions of silence and obedience. The wedding would happen quickly, before the Viscount discovered her true nature, before she could commit some new scandal to ruin everything. Once married and living 80 kilometers away, at the Campos Novos plantation, Katerina would be her husband's problem. "And the best part," said the Baron with a cruelty he didn't bother to hide, "is that Alexandre de Albuquerque is known for his moral rigidity and discipline. When he discovers what kind of wife he has—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The Baroness was already calculating. The dowry would be minimal, just 10 contos de re, a fifth of what the Viscount offered, some old jewels she no longer wore, and elderly house slaves too old to be useful. If the Viscount questioned it, they would say it was appropriate for the 3rd daughter. "Where is Katerina?" the Baron asked. "In the library, I imagine," Mariana replied with disdain. "Always with those dreadful books." "Have someone fetch her," the Baroness ordered. "We have news for her." While a maid was dispatched, the 4 remained in the office, savoring the unexpected solution to their most persistent problem. Outside, the shadows lengthened over the impeccable gardens, over the drying yards where coffee baked in the sun, over the slave quarters that Katerina watched from her window, with a sorrow she could never explain to her family. And somewhere in the library, between volumes of political philosophy she had to hide among etiquette texts, Katerina Eugentimo lived her last moments of ignorance before her entire world would change. The red seal was already broken. Destiny sealed. How will Katerina react upon learning she will be sent far away, married to a stranger? And who truly is the mysterious Viscount who has chosen her? 7 years earlier, April 1838, the imperial palace of San Cristóbal buzzed like a hive of silk and jewels. Baccarat crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling like captured constellations, each prism casting rainbows on the walls covered in golden damask. 300 guests, the cream of the imperial aristocracy, danced Viennese waltzes that floated through the air like perfumed sighs. It was the celebration of the young Emperor Dom Pedro II's 13th birthday, and attendance was not optional for anyone wishing to maintain relevance at court. Alexandre de Albuquerque was 29 that night. Recently returned from Coimbra, where he had spent 5 years studying law, he observed the festivity with the polite disinterest of someone who had already seen the salons of Lisbon and Paris. He had been introduced to dozens of eligible young ladies throughout the evening, all impeccable in their imported French gowns, all saying exactly what was expected of them, all so perfectly interchangeable that he could no longer distinguish one face from another. He was considering an early departure when he noticed a small commotion near the main doors. 3 young ladies were being presented to the court for the first time. One could recognize a debutante by the white camellia in her hair, the impeccable elbow-length gloves, the poorly disguised nervousness in her eyes. 2 of them were stunning in a conventional and predictable way. The eldest, whom someone whispered was Mariana Beatriz de Vasconcelos, had the ethereal beauty of Madonnas painted on church ceilings. She had played the piano earlier with a technique that drew polite applause, flawless, technically perfect, completely soulless. The second, Cecilia Adelaide, moved with a supernatural grace as if floating a few inches above the marble floor. She had danced a waltz with the minister's son, and the salons were still buzzing. The third was different. Katerina Eugenia was 13 that night, and she seemed profoundly uncomfortable in her own skin. Her white tulle dress was appropriate and expensive, but she wore it like unfamiliar armor. While her sisters chatted animatedly with suitors and courtiers, Katerina observed everything, with eyes too analytical for her age. Grey-green eyes that seemed to be cataloguing, questioning, judging. Alexandra noticed when she discreetly moved away from her family, skirting the edge of the ballroom, like a bird testing the bars of its cage. He noticed when she stopped before one of the large paintings adorning the walls, an idealized depiction of the discovery of Brazil, with indigenous people kneeling before a Christian cross. He noticed the critical expression that crossed her young face. And then it happened. The incident began with the sound of shattering glass. A young marquis, son of a traditional family from Minas Gerais, was visibly drunk. He gestured broadly as he spoke, his glass of red wine swinging dangerously in his hand. When a young enslaved boy, no more than 15, approached to offer more drink, the marquis made a sudden move. The wine spilled, not on the marquis, but on the sleeve of his own coat, a result of his careless gesturing. But he, with the twisted logic of the drunk and the powerful, did not see it that way. He saw only a convenient target. "You wretch!" The marquis's voice cut through the nearby conversations. "You spilled wine on me." The enslaved boy turned pale, his eyes wide with terror. "Sir, I did not—" "Silence!" The marquis looked around, his eyes feverish. Someone handed him a whip, because yes, there were whips available even at imperial balls, tools so common their presence was not even questioned. "I will teach you to be careful." The silence that followed was not shocked. It was expectant. This happened. It was normal. No one would interfere. The marquis raised his arm. The whip uncoiled like a serpent, and then a young but extraordinarily firm voice cut through the ballroom. "Stop at once!" 300 heads turned. The whip froze in midair. Catarina Eugenia de Vasconcelos y Mendonça, age 13, had risen from where she was sitting. Her small hands gripped the edge of the table as if it were the railing of a ship in a storm. At 13, before 300 aristocrats, she confronted a marquis. "This young man has done nothing wrong." Her voice trembled slightly, but it did not break. "I saw the entire interaction. Your lordship spilled the wine on yourself while gesturing." The boy was 3 paces away when it occurred. The silence was now absolute. You could hear the wax melting from the candles. Women did not interfere in the discipline of the enslaved. 13-year-old girls certainly did not publicly contradict a marquis. Across the ballroom, Baroness Leonore was as white as the marble statues. The marquis, his face red with rage and wine, took a step toward Katerina. "How dare you go? Lady Katerina is correct." The voice that interrupted the marquis belonged to the evening's host. Dom Pedro II, also 13, thin and serious beyond his years, had risen from his place at the imperial table. "We also observed the incident. The boy is innocent." The imperial intervention was not just support. It was law. The marquis, trembling with impotent rage, dropped the whip. The young enslaved boy was discreetly removed from the ballroom, saved by a brave girl and a child emperor with a conscience. Alexandra watched it all with a growing fascination he couldn't name. That girl possessed something extraordinary, something he rarely saw even in men 3 times her age: moral courage in a world of elegant cowardice. He watched as Katerina's family quickly removed her from the ballroom. As the Baroness whispered furiously in her ear, as the Baron apologized profusely to all present for his youngest daughter's eccentricity. But he also saw, just as Katerina passed through the doors, she glanced back once, not with regret, with certainty. That night, Alexandre de Albuquerque did something unusual. He asked a friend of the Vasconcelos family to provide him with information about them. In the following years, he made discreet inquiries. He learned of every scandal involving Katerina, every act of compassion that society deemed inappropriate, every progressive opinion that marked her as problematic. The argument about abolition at 16, the medicine distributed to the sick at 18, the family bought and freed at 20, and each piece of information only strengthened his certainty. He himself kept secrets few knew. On his own properties, far from the critical eyes of the court, he had begun a radical experiment. The gradual freeing of enslaved people, the payment of wages, the construction of a school and a hospital. It was revolutionary, economically risky, and if it became public too soon, he would lose the political influence he needed for greater change. Alexandra needed a wife who shared his values, not an aristocratic doll who played the piano perfectly while closing her eyes to injustice. He needed someone who had seen a child about to be whipped and had said no. For 7 years, he watched Katerina mature from a brave girl into an extraordinary woman. He knew when she studied French philosophy in secret. He knew when she sent letters to abolitionist newspapers under a pseudonym. He knew of every time her family punished her for having a conscience. And at 36, he finally decided to act. Not with seduction at balls. Not with a traditional courtship that her family would never allow. But with a formal, impossible-to-refuse letter, offering a dowry so generous that even the ambitious Baron of Alvarenga could not deny it. Alexandre de Albuquerque asked for Katerina Eugenia's hand, knowing exactly who she was, and hoping that she was just as brave now as she had been at 13. What will happen when Katerina discovers she was chosen? And why would a Viscount wait 7 years for a woman society deems unsuitable? Katerina was not present when the letter arrived. She was where she usually was on Thursday afternoons, in the library of Alvarenga Manor, her refuge from a world that insisted she be someone she was not. The library was a forgotten room in the east wing of the estate. The Baron had used it briefly as a young man, but had lost interest once he discovered that books did not generate profits as quickly as coffee. It now belonged to Katerina by abandonment. No one else wanted it, so no one cared that she spent hours there. The cedar shelves smelled of must and lavender. Katerina kept sachets between the volumes to combat the humidity that threatened the pages. The afternoon light streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air like tiny stars. She was reading Rousseau, or rather pretending to read a volume on French etiquette, while the forbidden text of The Social Contract lay open in her lap, hidden by the folds of her skirt. It was an elaborate dance she had perfected over the years, always have an acceptable book at hand, in case someone walked in, while she devoured the dangerous thoughts that truly mattered. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. The words touched her like invisible fingers. She was free on paper, a baron's daughter, educated, fed, clothed, but the chains existed. They were just made of expectations instead of iron, of disapproving glances instead of whips. A light knock on the door made her quickly close the book and hide it behind a cushion. Enter. It was Madame Geneviève, her French governess. The 60-year-old woman had entered the family's service 20 years earlier, when the Baron's first wife was still alive. She was the only person on the estate who looked at Katerina with anything other than exasperation or contempt. "Mon enfant," she said softly. "The Baroness requests your presence in the dining room." Katerina sighed. Family dinners were ordeals she endured with silent dignity. 20 years had taught her that attending did not mean belonging. "I know it is Thursday and you would prefer to eat here," Geneviève continued, but she insisted. She said there was— She hesitated. "News." Something in the old woman's tone made Katerina look up. "What kind of news?" "I was not told, ma chérie, but—" Geneviève moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I saw the messenger from the Albuquerques earlier. His uniform, the coat of arms." Katerina's heart gave a strange leap. The Albuquerques. One of the most important names in the empire. But what could they have to do with her family? She dressed for dinner with the minimal help she always preferred. She disliked maids adjusting every fold of fabric, pinning every strand of hair as if she were a doll to be arranged. She chose a simple dark blue cotton dress, tied her brown hair in a loose bun, and didn't bother with rouge or face powder. "You should," Geneviève began. "No," Katerina said gently. "Whatever it is, I will go as I am." The dining room glittered with far more lit candles than usual. The fine china was set on the lace-trimmed linen tablecloth. Fresh flowers perfumed the air. It was as if they were expecting important guests, but there was no one but the family. The Baron occupied the head of the table, large and imposing in his dark jacket. The Baroness sat to his right, her face composed in that mask of satisfaction Katerina had learned to fear. Mariana and Cecilia were already seated, and something in their smiles made Katerina's stomach clench. "Sit down, Katerina," the Baron ordered, and there was a false softness in his voice that alarmed her. She sat in silence, her hands folded in her lap. The soup was served, pumpkin cream with nutmeg. Katerina stirred it without interest, waiting. The silence stretched on, heavy and expectant. Finally, between the soup and the fish course, the Baron cleared his throat. "Katerina, we received an extraordinary piece of correspondence today." She kept her eyes on her plate. "The Viscount of Campos Novos, Alexandre Enrique de Albuquerque, has formally asked for your hand in marriage." The fork slipped from her fingers, clattering against the china, with a sound that echoed in the silence. What?" "You heard correctly," the Baroness said, and there was a triumphant note in her voice. "The Viscount specifically asked for you." Katerina felt the world tilt. Marriage, Alexandre de Albuquerque, a man she barely knew, whom she had only seen from a distance at court events over the years, a tall, serious figure always surrounded by admirers and suitors. But why? The question escaped before she could stop it. She immediately knew it was a mistake. Mariana and Cecilia exchanged glances, their lips trembling with suppressed laughter. "Those are impertinent questions," the Baroness cut in coldly. "You should be grateful for the opportunity. Few women with your reputation would receive a proposal from a Viscount." There it was. The word unsaid but always present, reputation. As if Katerina were damaged goods, a discounted item on the shelf of aristocratic marriages. "You have already accepted, I presume?" The words came out more bitter than she intended. "Naturally," said the Baron. "The contract will be signed tomorrow. Preparations will begin immediately. And when would this happen?" "You will leave for the Campos Novos plantation in 10 days. 10 days. 10 days until her entire life changed. 10 days to say goodbye to the only home she had ever known, even if it was a home that had never truly wanted her. The Viscount desires a swift wedding," the Baron continued. "Very convenient, don't you think?" Oh, she saw the convenience. She saw it perfectly. They were getting rid of her in the most advantageous way possible, before she could cause more scandals, before she completely ruined her sister's chances. "And the dowry?" she asked, because if she was going to be sold, she at least wanted to know the price. An uncomfortable silence. Then the Baroness, "10 contos de reis, some family jewels, a few housemaids, appropriate for a third daughter." Katerina didn't know much about aristocratic dowries, but she knew that was insulting. Mariana would receive at least 50 when she married, Cecilia no less than 30. "I understand," was all she said. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze. Conversations flowed around her. Discussions about preparations, about what to pack, about how she should behave. Katerina ate mechanically, each bite tasteless, each word like another brick being added to a wall between her and her family. When she was finally dismissed, she climbed the stairs slowly, her legs heavy. Her room was simple compared to her sister's, smaller, more remote, furnished with pieces left over from other wings. But it was hers. She closed the door, leaned against it, and allowed herself the luxury of silent tears. A marriage to a man who didn't know her, who must have asked for one of her sisters and received her by mistake or misinformation. When he discovered who she really was, strong opinions, no interest in empty etiquette, unable to feign indifference in the face of injustice, what would happen? A soft knock on the door. "C'est moi, chérie," came Genevieve's voice. Katerina opened it. The old woman entered, carrying a tray with chamomile tea and honey biscuits. "I thought you might need this." Katerina collapsed into the chair near the window. Genevieve poured the tea in silence, then sat on the edge of the bed, her wrinkled hands folded in her lap. "They are happy to be rid of me," Katerina finally said, her voice hoarse. "The brutal honesty was strangely comforting. "And the Viscount, he doesn't know who I really am. When he finds out—" "Mon enfant," Genevieve interrupted gently, "have you considered that perhaps he knows exactly who you are?" Katerina looked at her, confused. "Alexandre de Albuquerque is no fool," the old woman continued. "He is 36 and has yet to marry, despite being one of the most desired matches in the empire. They say he is different, that he is educated beyond what is common, that he holds progressive ideas which he keeps discreet." "How do you know this?" Genevieve smiled. "Old governesses hear things. And I have a cousin who works for the Dowager Countess of Albuquerque, his mother. The stories she tells—" "What stories?" "That the Countess is a fervent abolitionist, that she raised her son with unusual values, that he frees the enslaved on his properties, pays wages, has built a school. All in secret, but the stories leak out." Katerina's heart began to beat faster. "Is this true?" "I cannot guarantee it. But, chérie," Genevieve took her hands, "in my long life I have learned that truly intelligent men do not choose wives for beauty or a talent for playing the piano. They choose for character, for courage." The tears returned, but they were different now. "That would be impossible." "Would it? You saved a boy from being whipped when you were 13 in front of the entire court. Do you think no one remembered? That no one admired it?" Katerina closed her eyes. That night seemed so long ago, but she remembered the certainty she had felt, the certainty that some things were simply right regardless of the cost. "What should I do?" she whispered. "Go," Genevieve said simply. "Go and be yourself. If he wanted you because he heard who you are, then give him that truth. And if he wanted you by mistake," she squeezed Katerina's hands, "then at least you will be leaving this house." They sat in silence as the tea grew cold, as night fell over the Paraíba Valley, as destiny turned on its invisible wheel. 10 days until everything changed. Katerina decided that night she would not go as a victim. She would not go as a shamed commodity. She would go as herself, whole, honest, brave. And if Alexandra de Albuquerque rejected her, upon truly knowing her, at least she would do it with her dignity intact. And so begins the journey that will change everything. But who really is this mysterious Viscount? And what will happen when Katerina discovers the truth? March 22nd, 1845. Dawn arrived tinged with rose and gold, and with it, Katerina's final transformation from daughter to property, from person to a marriage promise. The carriage the Viscount had sent waited at the entrance of Alvarenga Manor like an invitation or a sentence. It was hard to tell which. It was magnificent, lacquered in a dark green like the coffee forests, with the Albuquerque coat of arms shining in gold leaf on the doors. 6 Arabian horses, white as new snow, stamped on the dirt ground. 4 armed horsemen flanked the vehicle, protection against the bandits that infested the roads of the Paraíba Valley. Katerina watched it all from her bedroom window as Geneviève packed the last items into her travel trunk. 10 days had passed like 10 minutes. There had been so much to do. Seamstresses taking measurements for the trousseau, lists of items to pack, rigid instructions on how to behave. Smile, but not too much. Speak, but do not opine. Be pleasant, but not memorable until the marriage is consummated, the Baroness had repeatedly instructed. Katerina had promised nothing. Now dressed in a navy blue traveling suit with white lace details, she looked at herself one last time in the mirror. Her brown hair was tied in a simple bun. No jewelry other than a small silver brooch that had belonged to her real mother. A pale face, determined eyes. "You look beautiful," Geneviève said softly. "I am terrified," Katerina corrected. "C'est normal. It would be strange if you were not." The farewell was as formal and cold as expected. The Baroness kissed her cheek without warmth, leaving only the scent of her expensive rose perfume. The Baron touched her forehead with dry lips. Mariana and Cecilia waved lace handkerchiefs, their expressions more relieved than sad. But when Katerina hugged Geneviève, the old woman held her with surprising strength. "Wait," she whispered, slipping something into Katerina's hands. "Something I should have given you years ago." It was a small faded velvet pouch. Inside, Katerina felt the texture of paper. Letters. "Your real mother wrote them before she died in childbirth," Geneviève whispered quickly, her eyes welling with tears. "The Baroness ordered them burned, but I hid them. Now you must know you were loved before you even existed." Katerina could barely speak. "Geneviève, va, mon enfant, and be free." The interior of the carriage was even more luxurious than the exterior. Crimson velvet upholstery, silk curtains that could be drawn for privacy, small embroidered cushions, a basket of candied fruit, and bottles of rosewater to freshen her face during the journey. As the carriage pulled away, Katerina did not look back. She looked forward, at the dusty road that stretched toward the unknown. Only when the manor had completely disappeared from view did she open the velvet pouch with trembling fingers. There were 5 letters. 5 letters written in a delicate feminine hand on paper yellowed by time. "To my yet unborn daughter," the first one began. Katerina read through tears that blurred the words. Her mother, Amelia Christina, the Baron's first wife, who died in childbirth at 25, had written of dreams and hopes, of how she longed to meet the child growing in her womb, of the values she wanted to pass on. "If you are a girl," one letter said, "teach her never to dim her light to comfort fragile men. Teach her that kindness is not weakness, that compassion is courage, that standing up for what is right is always worth any social cost." Another letter, "I have had an easy life, my daughter. Beauty, wealth, position. But I learned too late that these things are empty shells without moral substance. Do not let the world turn you into something empty. Be whole even if it is difficult, especially if it is difficult." The last letter written in a shakier hand, clearly in labor. "I am afraid, my love. The doctors have serious faces. But if these are my last words, let them be these. You were wanted. You will be loved. And no matter what happens, do not let the world diminish your fire. Burn, my daughter. Burn with all the intensity of a soul that knows who she is." Katerina clutched the letters to her chest and wept. She wept for the mother she had never known. She wept for the girl who had grown up thinking she was flawed. She wept for the woman she was becoming, scared but determined. The hours of travel passed in waves of changing landscape. The coffee plantations of the Paraíba Valley stretched in all directions, dark green under the strong sun. Occasionally they passed other estates, imposing manor houses, slave quarters, that Katerina tried not to look at because each one was a wound on her conscience. They stopped for lunch at a roadside inn. Katerina ate little. Her stomach churned with nervousness. One of the horsemen, a middle-aged man with a weathered face, approached her respectfully. "My lady, the Viscount instructed that we travel at a pace comfortable for you. If you wish to rest longer, we can." "No," Katerina replied. "The sooner we arrive, the better." It wasn't true, but prolonging the journey would only prolong the agony of anticipation. As they neared Campos Novos, the landscape began to change. The properties became more spaced out. The forests closed in nearer to the road, and then as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the road curved and there it was. The Campos Novos plantation. Katerina opened the curtains completely, her heart beating so hard it seemed to echo in the empty carriage. The manor house was magnificent, 3 stories in a neoclassical style, walls as white as snow, tall windows with green shutters. French gardens stretched out in front, geometrically perfect. A private chapel with a bell tower stood to the left. To the right, the coffee-drying grounds extended as far as the eye could see, a green and orderly sea. But there was something different, something that made Katerina frown in confusion. The workers she saw in the fields wore simple but dignified clothing. Not rags, not tatters, cotton shirts, clean trousers. And there were no chains. There were no overseers with whips walking among the rows. A black child ran across the front lawn, laughing, chasing a butterfly. A child playing freely without fear. What was this place? The carriage stopped at the main staircase. A tall man in simple livery opened the door. Katerina noticed he moved with dignity, not with the stooped posture that forced servitude created. "Welcome, my lady," he said, offering a hand to help her down. "I am Josue, the butler of Campos Novos house." Katerina took his hand and he helped her down gently, and then she saw him. Alexandre Enrique de Albuquerque was waiting at the top of the stairs. He was taller than he appeared from a distance. He must have been nearly 6'3", broad shoulders under a perfectly tailored dark jacket, black hair with silver streaks at the temples, despite being only 36, and eyes, dark, deep eyes that seemed to see through social masks to the naked soul beneath. "Lady Katerina," his voice was deep, polite, but there was warmth in it. "Welcome to Campos Novos." She made the perfect curtsy that years of forced etiquette had taught her, head slightly bowed, hands gracefully arranged. "Viscount of Campos Novos," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I thank you for the generosity of your invitation." He descended the steps, moving with the quiet confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. When he was close enough, he extended his hand, not for a formal kiss, but to shake hers as he would an equal's. Katerina hesitated only a second before accepting. The touch was electric, brief but intense. "Was your journey comfortable?" he asked as he guided her inside. "Very," she replied, still too stunned to form complex thoughts. The interior of the manor house was as impressive as the exterior. The entrance hall had a double-height ceiling, with a grand wooden staircase that split in two, meeting on an upper landing. Paintings adorned the walls, not just formal portraits of ancestors, but landscapes, scenes of Brazilian nature. "I imagine you are tired," Alexandre said. "I have prepared quarters for you in the East Wing. But first, if you will allow me, I would like a few minutes of conversation. There are things that need to be said." Katerina's heart sank. This was it. The moment he would admit the mistake, explain that he had asked for the wrong daughter's hand. "Of course," she said, lifting her chin. Dignity, no matter what came, she would maintain her dignity. He led her to a side parlor, smaller and more intimate than the grand main salon. Open windows let in the afternoon breeze, scented with jasmine. There was a low table with a tea service, Chinese porcelain decorated with blue birds. Alexandre poured the tea himself, without calling for servants. Katerina noted his hands, large but with precise, gentle movements. "Sugar?" he asked. "Yes, please." "2 lumps." He handed her the cup, then sat in the armchair opposite hers, not too close, respecting her space. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Katerina tried not to be the first to look away, a silent test of wills. Finally, Alexandra spoke. "Lady Katerina, I must ask you some questions that may seem impertinent." "Ah, so this was how it would begin." "Please," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "Why do you think I asked for your hand?" The directness of the question surprised her. Aristocrats were rarely so blunt. Katerina decided to be equally honest. "Because you did not know me, or because my family deceived you in some way. Because surely knowing me, you would not have chosen the problematic daughter over the beautiful and talented ones." He took a sip of tea, his eyes never leaving hers. "And what if I told you that I chose you because of your problematic reputation?" The air left her lungs. I don't understand." 7 years ago, Alexandra said calmly. At a ball in the Imperial Palace, I saw a 13-year-old girl confront a marquis to save a boy from being whipped. I saw moral courage that men 3 times her age did not possess. Katerina felt the world tilt. You remember? I never forgot. And in the following years, I did something some would consider invasive. I made inquiries about you. Her face flushed. What? I learned of every time you defended the defenseless, every time you placed conscience above social convenience. The argument about abolition, the medicine distributed during the epidemic, the family you bought and freed. My family, they said those things were scandals, Katerina whispered. They were. To a sick society, moral health is always a scandal. The words struck something deep within her. Tears pricked her eyes, but she held them back. So you know about who I am? I know of every flaw your family attributed to you, and I admire everyone. But my family thought they were playing a trick on you. They sent me as a punishment for me and a deception for you. Alexandra placed his cup on its saucer with deliberate care. I suspected as much. The ridiculous dowry they offered confirmed it. 10 contos when 50 would have been appropriate. But it doesn't matter, Katerina. I did not marry for a dowry. She noticed he had used her first name. The intimacy both shocked and warmed her. We are not yet married, she pointed out, her voice trembling. True, he agreed. And that is why I have a proposal. What is Alexandra about to propose? And how will Katerina react to discovering she was chosen for exactly who she is? Alexandra rose, walking to the window. The evening light gilded his profile, making him seem almost unreal, like a figure from a novel, not a man of flesh and blood standing a few feet away. Katerina, he said, still looking out at the gardens, I do not want you to marry me out of obligation. I do not want a wife who came because she had no choice. She waited, her heart beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. He turned to face her. I propose an arrangement. 6 weeks before any final decision on the marriage, you will be settled in the east wing of the manor, in your own quarters with your own maids. You will have complete privacy and freedom within the estate. Katerina tilted her head, confused. And then we will get to know each other, truly. We will talk, walk, share meals. I want you to know me not as the Viscount of Campos Novus, but as Alexandra. And I want to know not the Lady Katerina your family forced you to pretend to be, but the woman you truly are. And at the end of the 6 weeks, you will decide. If we are not right for each other, we will cancel the engagement. And no, you will not return to your family. Humiliated, he paused. I will provide you with the resources to establish your own life, a house in Paris, London, or wherever you wish, an education, financial independence, true freedom. Katerina was stunned. No man offers that to a woman. Then perhaps I am not like most men. She studied his face, searching for any sign of falsehood, of a trap. But all she saw was absolute sincerity. And if I accept this arrangement? She asked cautiously. Then promise me one thing. He drew nearer but maintained a respectful distance. Be completely yourself. Not the young lady your family wants you to be. Not what you think I want. Be the true Katerina. Opinions, courage, flaws and all. She extended her hand, bold in her formality. I promise, if you promise the same. When their palms met in a firm shake, they both felt the current, something indescribable, like the recognition of souls who have known each other for time immemorial. First week, revelations. The quarters in the East Wing were magnificent. A full suite with a bedroom, a private sitting room, a bathroom with a porcelain tub, and a spacious dressing room. The windows overlooked the gardens and, beyond them, the bluish mountains in the distance. 2 maids were assigned to her, women in their 40s, Teresa and Benedita, who treated her with genuine respect, not the bowing subservience Katerina so detested. Do you need anything else, my lady? Teresa asked after helping her settle in. No, thank you. And please, Katerina hesitated, do not call me my lady unless it is absolutely necessary. My name is Katerina. The 2 women exchanged surprised glances but then smiled. On the 2nd day, Alexandra took her to his private library. Katerina gasped. It was a temple. 3,000 volumes lined the walls from floor to ceiling in a vast circular room. Sliding ladders provided access to the upper shelves. There were reading tables with lamps, deep armchairs, and windows that let in perfect natural light. My God, Katerina whispered reverently, turning slowly. Feel free to read anything, Alexandra said, watching her delight with ill-disguised satisfaction. She pulled a volume at random, Rousseau's The Social Contract, then another, Malthus's An Essay on the Principle of Population, a third, Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, in the original English. You own Wollstonecraft, she breathed. You know of her? Alexandra seemed impressed. I read it in secret. My family would have burned it if they knew. Here, he said softly, nothing needs to be hidden. They spent hours that first week just discussing political philosophy. They discovered a startling agreement on abolition, universal education, and natural rights. They disagreed vigorously on classical economics versus state intervention, but it was a respectful, energizing disagreement. Do you really believe women should vote? He asked one afternoon, not with scorn but with genuine curiosity. I believe that rational human beings, regardless of sex, should have a voice in the decisions that govern their lives, she replied. What do you think? I think it is revolutionary. And correct. On the third night, Alexandra showed her something few knew about: work contracts. Legal documents freeing every enslaved person on his properties, replacing servitude with salaried employment. I started 2 years ago, he explained. I freed them all, built decent houses for the families. I pay fair wages. I built a school and a hospital. Katerina held the documents with trembling hands. You lost half your profits. I gained my conscience. She looked up, tears streaming freely. You did what I always dreamed my father would do. Your father, Alexandra said softly, is a moral coward. You are not. It was the first time someone had validated not just her actions but her core values. Second week, connection. Alexandra told her about his mother, the Dowager Countess Amelia, curiously the same name as Katerina's biological mother, a fervent abolitionist who had raised her son with values that were radical for the time. She said that a marriage without intellectual respect was a gilded prison, no matter how beautiful the cage. He shared as they walked through the gardens at dusk. Katerina opened up about her years of family rejection, about growing up feeling fundamentally flawed because her heart insisted on aching at injustices she was supposed to ignore. My stepmother. She is not cruel by nature, but she sees people as chess pieces. Mariana and Cecilia are valuable pawns. I am the broken piece. Alexandra stopped under a jasmine-covered pergola. The moonlight filtered through the flowers, drawing lacy patterns on their faces. You are not flawed, he said with an intensity that made her shiver. You are extraordinary in a mediocre family. When he reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb, it was the first touch that wasn't purely formal. Katerina felt a warmth spread from where he touched her, down her neck, flooding her chest. Third week, a controlled scandal. Katerina asked to visit the school Alexandra had built. It was a simple but solid building, with large windows that let in light. Inside, 40 children, all formerly enslaved, now free, were learning to read, write, and do arithmetic. The teacher, an educated black woman Alexandra had hired from São Paulo, approached. Viscount, good to see you. And this is Lady Katerina Eugenia, my fiancée, he introduced, and Katerina noted the pride in his voice. Katerina, this is Professor Joanna. Just Katerina, please, she corrected, extending her hand. The surprise on the teacher's face was quickly replaced by a warm smile. Would you like to help? Joanna offered. We always need more hands. Katerina spent the afternoon teaching children to read, sitting on the simple plank floor, surrounded by small bodies that smelled of soap and sun. She felt something she had never experienced in aristocratic salons: purpose. Alexandra watched from a distance, leaning against the doorframe. The woman sitting there, hair escaping her bun, laughing as a 6-year-old girl slowly spelled out "Ho You See," was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. He was falling more deeply in love each day. Fourth week, the soirée. Alexandra organized a private soirée, inviting neighbors but not the local conservative aristocrats. He invited other landowners who were secretly freeing their enslaved workers, progressive intellectuals and lawyers who defended abolitionist causes. It was a room full of discreet revolutionaries. Katerina, who expected to be introduced and forgotten, was surprised when Alexandra asked her to play the piano. I don't, she began. You play beautifully, he said quietly. Genevieve told me. You only refused for your family because they didn't deserve your art. She stared at him. How did you know that? Because I am learning to see through your defenses. So Katerina sat at the piano, a magnificent French Erard, and played. Not the technical, empty pieces that Mariana executed perfectly, but Chopin, the Nocturne Opera 9 No. 2, with all the melancholy and passion she had kept inside. The room fell completely silent. When the last note died away, there were tears on several faces. Alexandra didn't take his eyes off her all night. Fifth week, the declaration. A walk at dusk through the plantation. The workers had already returned to their homes. The coffee scented the air. The sky was turning lavender and rose. Alexandra stopped under an old silk floss tree, covered in pink flowers that fell like soft snow. "Katerina," his voice was hoarse, emotional in a way she had never heard before. "These 5 weeks have been the happiest of my life." "Mine too," she admitted, her heart racing. "I don't want to wait another week. I know what I want. I know what I need." He took her hands. "Marry me, not out of duty or obligation, but because I am hopelessly, completely in love with you." Katerina felt hot tears. "Alexandra?" It was the first time she had used just his name. The intimacy of the moment enveloped her like a cocoon. "I am in love too," she whispered. "But you need to know I will never be an obedient wife. I will always have opinions. I will always defend what is right, even if it is inconvenient." "I was counting on it," he said, smiling. "I don't want a submissive wife. I want a partner. I want an equal." "Then yes," she breathed. "Yes." The kiss happened as an inevitability. Her hands rose to frame his face. His arms pulled her close, and under the silk floss tree at sunset, two souls finally touched. It was not the chaste kiss of an aristocratic betrothal. It was the kiss of two people finding completeness in each other. 6th week, preparations. The Dowager Countess Amelia de Albuquerque arrived in a golden carriage, a 64-year-old woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper smile. "So you are the famous Katerina," she said, circling the young woman like a general inspecting a troop. Katerina lifted her chin. "Yes, my lady." "Well, thank God," the Countess declared. "Finally a daughter-in-law with a brain. I was worried he would choose some empty-headed doll." They understood each other immediately. Katerina insisted on sewing her own wedding dress, a radical choice. Aristocrats had them made by the finest seamstresses. But she wanted something personal, something that was hers. She chose simple white muslin, without the excesses of lace and ruffles that were in fashion. An empire waist, short sleeves and a single detail, a delicate embroidery of jasmine on the neckline, the flowers that scented the gardens where Alexandra had declared his love. Alexandra commissioned a special ring from a goldsmith in Lisbon. When it arrived, Katerina saw the internal engraving, "Libertas et amor," freedom and love. "Because that is what we are," he explained, "free to choose each other, and united by true love." The wedding was set for Saturday, May 10th, small, intimate, only 50 guests, true friends, not social obligations. The Vasconcelos family was invited out of protocol. They responded with a cold telegram, "Unable to attend, blessings." Katerina folded the telegram and put it away. It didn't hurt as much as she had imagined. She was free. The night before the wedding, she and Alexandra walked in the gardens. The full moon illuminated everything in silver. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will be the Viscountess of Campos Novos." "Tomorrow," she corrected, "I will be your wife. The title is just a word." He pulled her close, resting his chin on the top of her head. "You make me want to be a better man." "You already are," she whispered against his chest, hearing his steady, constant heartbeat. "You already are." The wedding approaches. But can this newfound happiness truly last? And what will happen when the outside world begins to press in again? Saturday, May 10th, 1845. Dawn arrived like a blessing, a clear sky without a single cloud. The air was scented with jasmine, coffee blossoms, and the fresh dampness of earth irrigated during the night. Katerina awoke before the sun had fully risen. From the window of her quarters, she watched the estate come to life. Workers walking to the communal breakfast, children running along the paths, the world functioning not with the tense silence of slavery, but with the natural hum of free people starting their day. Today she would be married. Teresa and Benedita entered carrying trays with coffee, fresh bread and fruit, but Katerina could barely eat. Her stomach was a knot of nerves and anticipation. "Are you ready, Katerina?" Teresa asked softly. "I am terrified," she admitted. "A good sign," Benedita smiled. "It would mean little if it weren't important enough to be frightening." The dress she had sewn herself waited in the closet. When she put it on with the help of the two women, Katerina barely recognized her own reflection. Not for its beauty. She would never be beautiful in the conventional sense. But there was something different in her eyes, something that looked like hope. Her hair was arranged simply, with loose tendrils framing her face. Fresh jasmine flowers were woven into the bun. No elaborate jewelry, just the simple pearls that had belonged to her real mother, discovered at the bottom of the small velvet pouch Genevieve had given her. When she descended the internal staircase leading from the east wing to the main hall, the Dowager Countess Amelia was waiting for her. "My dear son's heart would break if he could see you now," the lady said, her eyes welling with tears, "because he would finally understand that angels truly exist." "Countess, Amelia," she corrected firmly. "We are family now. And let me do what should have been your father's privilege." She offered her arm. Katerina took it, squeezing with a gratitude that words could not express. The chapel of Our Lady of Piety was small and perfect. Whitewashed walls, a dark wooden ceiling, a simple altar decorated with wildflowers. Pews that could seat perhaps 80 people, but only 50 places were occupied. There was no pomp. There were no hundreds of bored aristocrats attending out of obligation. There were only people who truly cared. Father Anselmo de Braganza, the family's chaplain for 30 years, waited at the altar. Beside him, Alexandra. Caterina paused at the entrance, her breath caught. He wore a dark but simple formal suit. No excessive decorations, no ostentation. Black hair combed back, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her tremble. As she began to walk down the central aisle beside Amelia, Caterina did not look away from him. And he did not look away from her. The choir, formed by farm workers, their voices untrained but sincere, sang a simple hymn. The music filled the chapel like a prayer-made sound. When they reached the altar, Amelia kissed Caterina's forehead and placed her hand in Alexandre's. "Take care of her," the Countess whispered to her son. "With my life," he promised. Father Anselmo began the ceremony. The words were traditional, but Caterina barely heard them. She was lost in Alexandra's eyes, in the large warm hands holding hers. Then came the time for the vows. "Viscount Alexandre Enrique de Albuquerque," said the priest, "do you promise to love, honor, and respect Lady Caterina Eugenia, in joy and sorrow, in richness and poverty, in health and sickness, until death do you part?" Alexandra held Caterina's hands tighter. "I promise, and I promise more, to never diminish her spirit, to never silence her voice, to never turn my partner into property." A murmur of surprise rippled through the chapel. Personalized vows were unusual. The priest blinked, then smiled. "Lady Catarina Eugenia de Vasconcelos y Mendonça, do you promise to love, honor, and respect Viscount Alexandre Enrique, in joy and sorrow, in richness and poverty, in health and sickness, until death do you part?" Caterina took a deep breath. "I promise, and I promise more, to be his equal in all battles, his conscience when mine is clearer, his strength when his falters." Alexandre smiled, that rare smile that transformed his serious face into something radiant. "Then, by the power vested in me by the Holy Church and the Empire of Brazil," Father Anselmo declared, his voice echoing off the stone walls, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined, let no man put asunder." He looked at Alexandra, his eyes shining. "So you may kiss your wife, my son." The kiss was chaste, appropriate for an altar, but there was a promise in it, a promise of all the kisses that would come later, away from watchful eyes. When they turned to face the guests, the choir burst into music, not a formal religious hymn, but a coffee worker's song, transformed into a celebration. Voices rose, strong and free, singing of hope and new beginnings. Caterina and Alexandre walked back down the aisle, now husband and wife, as flowers were tossed by children who didn't fully understand the moment's meaning, but felt the joy. Outside, the sun shone with blinding intensity. Life awaited them. The celebration was not a formal ball in the salon. It was a party in the drying yard under the open sky. Tables were arranged in a circle. The food was simple but abundant. Barbecued meat grilled by the workers themselves, rice, beans, fried cassava, fruit tarts, homemade cakes. It was not the food of aristocrats. It was the food of a genuine celebration. And the scandal of scandals, workers and progressive aristocrats all sat together. Josue, the butler, shared a table with an abolitionist lawyer. Teresa laughed with a doctor's wife. Children ran between adults without distinction of color or class. It was a quiet revolution, happening in a farm's drying yard, disguised as a wedding. As the sun began to set, Alexandra led Caterina to the center of the yard. Musicians, a guitar, a viola, a bass drum, began to play. Not a formal minuet, but a simple waltz, a melody anyone could follow. "May I have this dance, Viscountess of Campos Novos?" he asked with an exaggerated bow. "Only if you promise to never call me by my title again when we are alone," she replied, laughing. "Done deal, my Caterina." And they danced, under stars that began to dot the purple sky. Surrounded by people who genuinely loved them, they twirled and twirled until they were dizzy and laughing. "We are a walking scandal," she whispered against his chest. "We are a walking revolution," he corrected, smiling into her hair. Later, much later, when the party finally ended and the guests had departed, Alexandra led Caterina by the hand through the dark gardens to the wing where the main quarters of the manor house were located, the quarters they would now share. The windows were open, letting in a fragrant night breeze. Candles had been lit, casting a soft golden light. The four-poster bed was covered with white linen sheets, rose petals scattered over them, A romantic touch from Amelia, surely. Katerina stopped in the center of the room, suddenly nervous. She had read about this, but reading and experiencing were drastically different things. Alexandra approached slowly, as if approaching a bird that might fly away. "Katerina," she looked up. "We can just sleep if you prefer," he said softly. "There is no rush. There will never be a rush. You are my wife, but that does not mean I have a right to your body without your genuine desire." The words touched her deeply. How many men would say that on their wedding night? "I want to," she whispered. "I'm just nervous." He smiled, that smile that melted her defenses. "I am too." "You? But you are 36, and I have never been with a woman who truly mattered," he interrupted her. "There have been others, yes, but they were mechanical. You are different. You matter. So yes, I am terrified of disappointing you." The vulnerability in his voice undid the last of her nervousness. Katerina took a step toward him, raising her hands to unbutton his waistcoat. "Then," she said, her voice firmer now, "let's find out together." And they did, slowly, gently, with an initial awkwardness that gave way to a growing understanding of bodies learning each other's language. It was not the consummation of an aristocratic contract. It was the union of two souls who had freely chosen each other. And when they finally fell asleep, tangled in the rumpled sheets, rose petals crushed beneath them, there was a peace in both their hearts that they hadn't known they were longing for. Outside, the moon crossed the sky. The coffee grew silently. The world kept turning. But in that bed, in that room, in that moment, everything was perfect. 6 months of perfect happiness follow. But every story needs a storm before the final calm. And that storm is about to arrive. June to November 1845. The months following the wedding were the happiest Katerina had ever known. She woke every morning to the sun streaming through the windows, Alexandra's arms around her, and the quiet certainty of being exactly where she was meant to be. Life at the Campos Novos plantation settled into its own rhythm. Katerina was not a decorative wife who spent her days embroidering and receiving visitors. She was an active partner in everything. In the mornings, she worked at the school. The children adored her. Viscountess Katerina quickly became just Katerina, or, for the youngest, Donna Kata. She taught not only reading and writing, but history, basic philosophy, and critical thinking. "Why is the sky blue?" a 7-year-old boy asked once. Instead of simply answering, Katerina took him outside. "What do you think? Did God paint it? A good theory. How could we test it? What else do we know about light and colors?" She taught them to question, to think, to not accept ready-made answers. In the afternoons, she helped Alexandra with his legal work. He defended freedom cases, enslaved people from other estates who were suing for their manumission. It was dangerous work that angered the powerful, but it was necessary. Katerina proved to be excellent at legal research. She read law texts with meticulous attention, finding obscure precedents that Alexandra used brilliantly in court. "You should have studied law," he said one afternoon, looking at her with admiration as she pointed out a specific argument in an old code. "Women can't," she replied pragmatically, "but I can help you change the world anyway." In the evenings, they dined with Amelia, who had moved permanently to Campos Novos. The Dowager Countess loved having intelligent female company. Finally, someone with whom to discuss politics and philosophy beyond embroidery and gossip. "I read in the papers that there is a movement in the chamber for a law to ban trafficking," Amelia mentioned one night over pea soup. "Theosebio Decatur's law," Alexandra confirmed. "But there is strong resistance. Landowners fear an economic collapse without new shipments." "That they call human beings shipments, as if they were coffee or sugar," Katerina said bitterly, "already shows exactly why they need to be stopped." Conversations like this would go on for hours, just the three of them, passionate voices debating the future they wanted to build. Katerina also discovered she enjoyed managing the household, not in the sense of ordering servants, but of ensuring that everyone, workers, maids, teachers, artisans living on the estate, had what they needed. When she found out that several women lacked adequate clothing for the approaching winter, she organized a sewing circle. She sat with them, needle in hand, sewing side by side. "My lady," one of the women said, embarrassed, "this is not work for a viscountess." "Katerina," she corrected automatically. "And why not? My hands work just as well as yours." Alexandra, passing through the hall where they worked, stopped at the door. He saw his wife surrounded by women who were laughing and talking freely, all working together, and his heart swelled with pride and love. This was the woman he had chosen. This was the revolution they were building together. September brought news. Katerina was sitting in the library on a hot afternoon, reading Plato in the original Greek, which she had learned from a secret tutor years ago, when a wave of nausea hit her. She ran to the bathroom and was violently sick. Teresa, who was changing towels nearby, approached with a damp cloth and a knowing look. "How many days late?" she asked gently. Katerina, still pale, calculated mentally. 3. "No, 4 weeks. Congratulations, Viscountess." The world stopped. A child. She was carrying a child. She told Alexandre that night. He was in his office reviewing legal petitions when she walked in. "I need to tell you something." He looked up, immediately alert to her serious tone. "What happened?" "I am pregnant." The silence lasted for 3 heartbeats. Then Alexandre was on his feet, around the desk, pulling her into his arms with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. "Are you sure?" "All the signs. We will see the doctor tomorrow to confirm, but—" "Yes." He buried his face in her hair. She felt dampness against her neck, tears. "Alexandre—" "Sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's just a child. Our child. Who will grow up in a world we are helping to change. Who will grow up knowing that people are not property," she added softly. "Who will learn compassion and justice as core values. Who will have a brave and conscientious mother," he said, pulling back to look at her. "As I had." The pregnancy was confirmed. Katerina was 6 weeks along. The doctor, a progressive whom Alexandre kept on retainer, said everything seemed healthy. Amelia, when she found out, cried with joy. A grandchild! Finally! But not all news was good. In November, rumors began to arrive from Valencia. The Vasconcelos family was in trouble. An imperial investigation into financial irregularities. There was talk of mismanagement of public funds, of bribery, of illegally obtained contracts. Nothing criminally solid enough for prison. The Baron was too clever for that, but enough to tarnish a reputation, freeze access to credit, and make allies distance themselves. Alexandre received reports from friends at court. He read them to Katerina at night, the two of them lying in bed, his hand resting protectively on her belly, which was beginning to round. "They say Mariana's engagement to the Portuguese count has been broken," he mentioned one night. Katerina felt a pang of sadness. As cruel as Mariana had been to her, she didn't deserve to have her dreams destroyed by her father's actions. And Cecilia, the minister's son who was courting her, has disappeared. His family sent him to study in Paris, very convenient. "They are going to lose everything," Katerina whispered. "Possibly. Your father has made bad choices for years. It was inevitable there would eventually be consequences. But my sisters, it's not their fault." Alexandra turned on his side to face her. "You have too generous a heart. I have too good a memory," she corrected. "I remember every humiliation, every cruel word. But I also remember Mariana once, when we were 12 and 9, consoling me when I fell and hurt my knee, before she learned from our mother to despise me. What do you want to do?" "Nothing. Not yet," she said. "But when they ask for help, and they will. I want to be prepared to be bigger than they were with me." He kissed her forehead. "You make me want to be a better man. You are already the best man I know." They fell asleep in each other's arms, unaware that the approaching storm would arrive sooner than they imagined. As Katerina and Alexandre build their paradise, the outside world conspires to test them. The greatest trial is yet to come. December 1845, summer arrived with force, a humid heat that clung to the skin like a second layer. Katerina, now 4 months pregnant, found her body reacting to gestation in ways no one had warned her about. Not just morning sickness, which ironically lasted all day, but also heightened emotional sensitivity, a fatigue that knocked her down without warning, and a strange glow in her eyes that Alexandra said made her even more beautiful. "I am swollen like a pumpkin," she complained one morning, looking at herself in the mirror. "You are carrying our child," he corrected, hugging her from behind, his hands resting on her visible curve. "You are perfect." She was about to reply when a maid knocked urgently on the door. "Pardon, Viscountess. There are visitors." "We are not expecting anyone," Alexandra frowned. "No, sir, they just arrived, in a simple carriage. They say they are the Viscountess's family." Katerina's blood ran cold. They descended together, their hands intertwined. In the entrance hall, 3 figures were waiting. Baron Augusto de Vasconcelos y Mendonça seemed to have aged 10 years in 8 months. His hair was grayer, his face thinner, his shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. He wore a simple suit, not the expensive clothes he used to flaunt. Baroness Leonor maintained a rigid posture, but there was desperation in her eyes. And Mariana. Mariana, who had always been so beautiful, seemed withered. The dress that had once been elegant was faded. She wore no jewelry. Katerina stopped on the last step, Alexandre slightly in front of her. a subtle protective stance. "Baron of Alvarenga," Alexandra greeted formally. "This is an unexpected visit. Viscount of Campos Novos," the Baron bowed more deeply than protocol required. "Ill-disguised humiliation. I apologize for the intrusion, but I have come on a matter of family urgency, a matter that could not be communicated by letter." The Baron looked at Katerina. For the first time in her life, she saw something new in his eyes when he looked at her. Need. May I speak with my daughter in private?" "No," Alexandra said calmly. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of me." Tension thickened the air. Finally, the Baron spoke. "I am in trouble. Financial, political. Due to mismanagement of certain affairs, I have lost access to credit. Several properties have overdue mortgages. If I do not raise 150 contos de reis in 2 months, I will lose everything." Silence. "And you came to ask me," Katerina said, her voice controlled but cold. "You are my daughter. You have an obligation." "Obligation?" The word came out like a whip. "I was 13 and defended someone being wronged, and you punished me. I was 17 and saved lives during an epidemic, and you called me a disgrace. I was 20 and bought a family's freedom, and you almost locked me in a convent." Katerina, no. She descended the last step, planting herself firmly. Months of happiness had given her something new, absolute certainty of her own worth. "For 20 years you made me feel flawed for having a conscience. Now you want to use that same conscience to save you from the consequences of not having one." The Baron paled. "I am your father. A father cares. A father protects. A father loves," and tears burned her eyes but did not fall. "You treated me like defective merchandise. You married me off to the first man who asked, thinking you were playing a trick on him. Remember?" The Baroness intervened. "You are being dramatic. We obviously took care of you. We gave you an education, food, clothes." "You gave me survival," Katerina interrupted, "not love. There is a difference." Alexandra placed a hand on her shoulder, not controlling but supporting. "Baron, you must understand the delicate position you are asking for. My wife, whom your family rejected and belittled, whom you sent here as punishment, for whom you offered a paltry dowry because you thought I wouldn't discover her. Let's call them eccentricities." The Baron had the decency to look ashamed. "But you didn't count on 2 things," Alexandra continued, his voice dangerously calm. "First, I knew exactly who Katerina was. I chose her because of her moral conscience, not despite it. Second, she documents everything." The Baron's eyes widened. "What?" Katerina took a deep breath. "The moment of final revelation. For years, I kept evidence. Every questionable contract you signed, every bribe I witnessed, every illegal favor exchanged. Letters, documents, witnesses willing to speak." The Baroness grabbed her husband's arm. You wouldn't dare?" Katerina stepped forward. "You taught me to dare when you punished me for doing what was right. I learned that sometimes defying an unjust authority is the only moral path." A heavy silence fell over the hall. Even the servants watching discreetly from the side doors seemed to hold their breath. "Are you threatening me?" the Baron asked, his voice trembling between anger and fear. "No," Alexandra intervened, his voice sharp as a blade. "We are establishing context. You came to ask for considerable financial help from a daughter you despised. You need to understand that this requires a re-evaluation of family relations." Mariana, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly. "Katerina," her voice was different without its usual arrogance. "I know I was cruel. I know I don't deserve your kindness. But Cecilia, she is only 23. She had no part in our father's decisions. If we lose everything, she will be left without a dowry, without prospects, possibly on the street." It was a smart appeal to Cecilia. Katerina had always had a soft spot for her middle sister, who sometimes showed flashes of kindness when no one was looking. Katerina looked at Alexandra. A silent conversation passed between them. Years of marriage condensed into months by the intensity of their connection. He nodded slightly. The decision was hers. "Very well," Katerina finally said, "but with conditions." "Anything," the Baron said too quickly. "No, not anything. My specific conditions." She squared her shoulders, her hand unconsciously resting on her rounded belly. "First, it is not 150 contos. It is 20. Enough to settle the most urgent debts and provide modest dowries for my sisters. But that won't. Second, it is not a loan. It is a final donation. You will never again approach me or my husband for financial help. You will never again use my name or our connection to obtain favors." The Baroness opened her mouth to protest, but Katerina raised a hand. "Third, You will distance yourself from questionable business dealings. The documents I possess will be kept safe, but any new transgression, and they go directly to the Emperor. Fourth, my sisters are welcome here whenever they wish to visit me. But you, she looked pointedly at the Baron and Baroness, never again. After today, we are not family. We are strangers connected only by blood. You can't— Fifth and final condition, Katerina interrupted, her voice finally breaking. You will admit here and now that I was never flawed, that you treated me unjustly. You don't need to apologize. I know you are not capable of that. But you need to acknowledge the truth. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to have stopped. The Baron looked at the floor. His shoulders slumped even further. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost inaudible. You were not flawed. I was wrong. It wasn't much. It wasn't the apology Katerina deserved. But it was the truth torn from a proud man, and there was power in that. I accept the conditions, he concluded, defeated. Alexandra called for Josue. Prepare legal documents reflecting this agreement. The Baron of Alvarenga will sign before he leaves. While Josue went to fetch a writing board and paper, a tense discomfort filled the hall. The Baroness stared at anything but Katerina. Mariana fixed her gaze on the marble floor. It was Katerina who broke the silence, turning to her older sister. Mariana, would you like to see the gardens? Surprise flickered in Mariana's eyes. Yes, if you'd like. The two women exited through a side door, leaving the others in the hall. Alexandra watched his wife go, trusting that she knew what she was doing. The French garden was in full summer bloom. Red and white roses scented the air. A stone fountain spouted crystal-clear water into a small pond, where goldfish swam lazily. Mariana walked in silence beside Katerina for a few minutes, the only sounds being the rustle of their skirts and the distant song of a thrush. You look beautiful, Mariana finally said, looking at her sister's rounded belly. Pregnancy suits you. Thank you. More silence. Then, I was horrible to you, Mariana whispered. For years. Not because you deserved it, but because Mother, the Baroness, she said you embarrassed us, and I was so afraid of not being perfect enough that I attacked you to feel superior. Katerina stopped by the fountain, watching the fish. I know. You know. I always knew. I saw the fear in you, Mariana. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of having your own opinions. Fear of being anything other than what was expected. Mariana sat on the edge of the fountain, not caring about her faded dress. Tears finally escaped. My engagement was broken, not just because of Father's financial problems, but because the Count discovered that I have no personality of my own. He said marrying me would be like marrying a well-trained doll. Katerina sat beside her, more slowly because of her belly. And he was right, Mariana continued, her voice breaking. I am 26 and I don't know who I am. I only know who I was told to be. I play the piano perfectly, but I don't feel the music. I speak 3 languages, but I have nothing to say. It's not too late, Katerina said gently, taking her sister's hand. Isn't it? You have your whole life ahead of you. And if Father loses the estate, perhaps it will be liberation. Mariana looked at her, confused. Without crushing expectations, Katerina explained. Without the need to be perfect. Just the need to be real. Like you always were. Not always. It took me time to find courage. And it helped immensely to find someone who loved me exactly as I am. She squeezed Mariana's hand. You are my sister. I don't particularly like you. Not after years of cruelty. But I love you because blood is blood. And I am willing to give you a chance to discover who you really are. Why? Mariana asked, genuinely confused. After everything? Because someone has to break the cycle of cruelty. It might as well be me. Mariana hugged her then, an awkward hug, hindered by the belly between them, but real. Katerina felt her sister's tears soaking her shoulder and allowed her own to fall as well. Healing doesn't happen instantly, but it can begin with an honest hug in a fragrant garden. When they returned to the hall, the documents were ready. The Baron signed with a trembling hand, a legal acknowledgement that he was receiving 20 contos as a final donation and relinquishing any future right to ask for more. Alexandra had already sent a messenger to the bank with transfer instructions. The money would be available in 2 days. The farewell was brief and formal. The simple carriage was waiting. The Baron and Baroness entered without looking back. Mariana hesitated at the door, turning one last time. May I write to you? She asked shyly. Yes, Katerina replied. I would like that. A small, genuine smile. Perhaps the first Katerina had seen on Mariana's face in years, and then she too entered the carriage. Katerina and Alexandra watched the carriage drive away down the dusty road until it completely disappeared. "You did the right thing," Alexandra said, holding her from behind. "I did the thing that lets me be at peace with myself," she corrected. "It's not the same. For you it is. And that is why I love you." She turned in his arms, resting her head on his chest. "They will never really understand, you know. They will think they won, that they extracted money from me. But you know the truth. You won. You won by being bigger than them, by keeping your humanity intact." The baby kicked then, the first strong kick Katerina had felt. She gasped, taking Alexandra's hand and placing it on her belly. "Did you feel that?" Another kick. Alexandra's eyes widened, a childlike wonder crossing his serious face. "Our child," he whispered reverently. "Strong like his mother, or stubborn like his father," she laughed through her tears. They went inside hand in hand, closing the door against the outside world. Inside there was warmth, light, love, and for the first time in her life, Katerina was completely at peace. But peace has a price, and the cost of this kindness will reveal itself in unexpected ways. January 1846. The new year arrived with torrential rains that turned roads into rivers of mud. Katerina, now 7 months pregnant, moved heavily through the house like a ship in calm seas. Her body was no longer her own. It belonged to the baby that grew, kicked, and turned inside her. "It feels like there's a revolution happening in my belly," she complained one morning, when a particularly strong kick made her gasp. "The child of 2 revolutionaries." Alexandra smiled, kissing her exposed belly. What did we expect? The pregnancy had forced her to reduce her activities. She could no longer spend entire days at the school. The heat and fatigue would overwhelm her. Instead, she received a few children in the library in the morning for private lessons. "Viscountess Katerina," said Miguel, a bright 9-year-old boy. "Why are some people born free and others not?" It was these questions that made her keep teaching, even when her body begged for rest. "Because the world has not yet learned that everyone is born with the same dignity," she replied. "But it is learning slowly. And when will it learn completely? Oh, when brave people like you grow up and refuse to accept injustice." The boy nodded seriously, as if he had been given a sacred mission. In mid-January, a letter arrived from Mariana. Katerina read it on the porch in the soft afternoon light. "Dearest sister, I write with news that I don't know if it is good or bad. Father has sold 3 of the 5 plantations. With that money and the 20 contos you gave us, we managed to settle the most urgent debts. We are still barons. The title cannot be bought or sold, thank God. But we are poor barons. We have moved to a smaller estate in Valencia. The house has only 10 rooms, imagine. 10 rooms seemed like a palace when we were children, but now I feel as if the walls are closing in. Cecilia, she has always been more adaptable than I. She's helping Mother with the vegetable garden. Yes, we have a vegetable garden now. We grow our own vegetables. It is strange, but not unpleasant. As for me, I am different. Without suitors, without balls, without the obligation to be perfect, I have discovered that I enjoy reading. Real books, not just romantic novels. I borrowed a volume of poetry by Lord Byron from the local library. It is revolutionary and frightening, and makes my heart beat faster. Perhaps you were right. Perhaps this fall is the beginning of something new. With growing affection, Mariana Katerina folded the letter carefully, tucking it into the pocket of her loose maternity dress. There was hope in those words. Hope that a family could transform even if painfully. "Good news?" Alexandra asked, bringing her a cold ginger tea that helped with the persistent nausea. Complex, but perhaps good eventually. It was 3 days later that the complications began. Katerina was in the library when she felt a sharp pain slice through her abdomen. Not contractions, it was still too early. Something different, something wrong. "Teresa!" she called, her voice coming out weaker than she intended. The maid entered, saw the paleness on Katerina's face, and ran to get Alexandra. The doctor was summoned urgently. Dr. Henrique Matias, a middle-aged man with gentle hands and a serious expression, examined her thoroughly. "Partial placental abruption," he finally said to Alexandra in the hallway. "Not critical yet, but serious. She needs absolute bed rest. Bed, no exceptions, until the birth." "For how long?" Alexandra asked, his voice tense. 2 months, at least. Any exertion could worsen the abruption and put both mother and baby at risk. Alexandra returned to the room where Katerina lay, eyes closed, a hand protectively over her belly. "I heard," she said before he could speak. 2 months in bed. We will get through this." He sat carefully beside her. "Together. The children at the school. Joanna will take over completely. You trained her well. The legal work can wait, or I will hire a temporary assistant. Nothing is more important than you and our child. Tears escaped from the corners of Katerina's eyes. I hate feeling useless. Useless? He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. You are growing a human being inside you. You are literally creating life. How is that useless? She gave a weak laugh. When you put it that way. The next 2 months tested Katerina in ways that physical danger never had. She, who had always been active, independent, useful, was now confined to bed. Reading helped, but there were hours when books were not enough. Alexandra completely reorganized his days to be with her, as much as possible. He worked at a desk he had moved into the bedroom, just a few feet from the bed. This way they could talk while he reviewed documents. "Read to me," she would sometimes ask. And he would read philosophy, poetry, newspaper articles. His deep voice turned even the driest texts into music. Amelia visited daily, bringing stories, harmless gossip, and the motherly affection Katerina had never had. When I was pregnant with Alexandra, the Countess recounted one afternoon, I had to stay in bed for the last 3 months. I thought I would go mad. But a wise midwife told me, this is a time for dreaming. Dream of who your child will be. Dream of the world they will inhabit. And did you dream? I dreamed of a good man in a cruel world. I dreamed of raising him with values that mattered. And see, she pointed to Alexandra working at the desk. Dreams came true. Katerina placed a hand on her belly. Then I will dream too. In February, the rains gave way to a suffocating heat. Katerina, huge and uncomfortable, barely slept. The baby seemed to sense her discomfort and moved constantly. It was on one of those sleepless nights that she finally asked something that had been bothering her for months. Alexandre? He was half asleep, his arm protectively over her. Why did you never marry before? 36 years old, one of the most coveted matches in the empire. Yet you waited. Why? A long silence. She thought he had fallen back asleep, but then he spoke. Because I saw my parents' marriage. True love, a real partnership. They respected each other intellectually, agreed morally, completed each other. When my father died, my mother was widowed at 42. She could have remarried. She was beautiful, wealthy, desirable, but she said she had already had her great love. Anything after would be an insult to his memory. He turned on his side to face her in the dark. I saw that and I knew. Marriage is not a social obligation. It is a sacred choice. So I waited. I waited until I saw a 13-year-old girl defend an enslaved boy. I waited until I knew that a brave woman existed. And then I waited until she was old enough to choose me back. Katerina cried silently, the tears soaking into her pillow. You waited for me, she whispered in wonder. For 7 years. I would have waited 70 if necessary. I love you, she said, not for the first time, but with a renewed intensity. I love you so much it sometimes hurts. I know. I feel the same. They fell asleep intertwined as close as the enormous belly would allow, two souls united beyond what words could express. And then when March arrived with its promises of spring, the real test would begin. March 1846. The month arrived with violent storms. Lightning tore across the night sky, thunder shook the windows, and rain beat against the roofs with an almost vengeful fury, as if the sky itself were in labor, preparing for a great transformation. Katerina was in her 12th week of forced rest, her 8th month of pregnancy. Her body was immense, uncomfortable, ready. The doctor came 3 times a week to check. The placental abruption had stabilized but remained delicate. 2 more weeks, Dr. Matthias had said on his last visit. If we make it to full term, the baby will have excellent chances. But babies rarely follow human schedules. It was on a night of a particularly violent storm, Thursday, March 13th, that it all began. Katerina woke to a strange wetness between her legs. At first she thought she'd lost control of her bladder, an embarrassing but common occurrence in late pregnancy. But then she felt a contraction, not like the Braxton Hicks she'd been experiencing for weeks, but something different, deeper, more insistent. Alexandra, she shook him gently. Wake up. He was awake instantly, trained by months of vigilance to respond to her slightest call. What is it? I think it's time. In seconds he was on his feet, lighting lamps, calling for maids. The house, which had been asleep moments before, woke in a burst of urgent activity. Teresa and Benedita ran in. Amelia appeared in a nightrobe, her grey hair loose on her shoulders. I've sent for the doctor, Alexandra said, returning to the room. But with this storm he may be delayed. It doesn't matter. Amelia took control with the authority of someone who had been through this before. I was born on a farm. I have seen births. We will be fine. The following hours dissolved into a haze of pain and effort. The contractions came in increasingly close waves. Katerina, who had always been strong, discovered that physical strength meant nothing against labor. "Breathe," Amelia instructed, holding her hand. "Breathe through the pain." Alexandra refused to leave the room. It was not proper. Men did not witness births, but he completely ignored social protocol. "I am here," he would whisper, wiping sweat from her brow with a damp cloth. "I am here." The doctor finally arrived, soaked from the storm, carrying a leather bag with his instruments. He examined her quickly. "Advanced labor," he announced. "The cervix is fully dilated. On the next contraction you will push." "I don't know," Katerina began, frightened. "Your body knows," Dr. Matthias said calmly. "Trust it." And her body did know. When the next contraction came, Katerina felt an overwhelming urge to push. She did, screaming with the effort, squeezing Alexandra's hand so hard he would have bruises later. "Again," the doctor commanded. "Push." She pushed, and pushed, and pushed. Time lost all meaning. There was only pain, effort, the primal need to bring life into the world. "I see the head," Dr. Matthias shouted. "One more! A big one!" Katerina gathered every last ounce of remaining strength and pushed with everything she had. She felt a burning, then the pressure giving way, then a cry, the sharp, indignant scream of a newborn baby. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a small pink wailing body. "A perfect girl." Katerina collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond words. Alexandra was openly weeping, tears streaming down his face. Teresa cut the cord. Benedita cleaned the baby with a warmed blanket. And then finally Amelia placed the child in Katerina's arms. She was tiny, perfect. Her face was red and wrinkled, her fists clenched, her mouth open in protest against the cold, strange world. Dark, wet hair, eyes squeezed shut. "Hello," Katerina whispered, touching the soft cheek. "Hello, my little warrior." The baby calmed immediately at the sound of her voice, the voice she had heard for months from within the womb. Her eyes opened, dark and focused with an impossible intensity for a newborn. "She is looking at you," Alexandra breathed in wonder. "She knows who I am," Katerina replied, tears dripping onto the child. Dr. Matthias completed the post-birth procedures, delivering the placenta, checking for tears, stitching where necessary. Katerina barely felt it. She was completely absorbed in the small life in her arms. "She is healthy," the doctor finally declared. "About 7 pounds. Excellent lungs, judging by the cry. A perfect APGAR score. And Katerina?" Alexandra asked, finally looking away from the baby. "Tired, but well. The abruption did not worsen during the birth. She needs rest, proper nutrition, but she is out of danger." Alexandra sank into the chair beside the bed, finally allowing himself to relax. Amelia sat on the other side, her fingers lightly touching her granddaughter's dark hair. "What will you name her?" the Countess asked. Katerina and Alexandra exchanged a look. They had discussed names, but suddenly they all seemed inadequate. "Beatrice," Katerina said finally. "Beatrice Amelia de Albuquerque." Alexandra smiled. "Perfect. Beatrice means she who brings happiness," Amelia said softly, her eyes misty. "And my name? You honor me too much." "You gave me the motherly love I was denied," Katerina said. "It is the least I can do." Little Beatrice yawned, a tiny, adorable movement, and closed her eyes, falling asleep in her mother's arms. Outside the window, the storm began to subside. The lightning grew more distant. The rain softened, as if even nature recognized that something sacred had just happened. A new life has arrived, but with it, new challenges and transformations that no one could have foreseen. April to August 1846. The first months of motherhood were a revelation and a revolution. No one had told Katerina about the absolute exhaustion, about how every cell in your body aches, when you've barely slept 3 hours in an entire night because a baby wakes every 2 hours to nurse, about how the love for such a tiny creature could be so immense it felt impossible for your heart to fit inside your chest. Beatrice was an intense baby. When she was hungry, she wailed with lungs that belied her tiny size. When she was happy, she smiled with pink gums and eyes that shone like stars. When she was curious, and she was always curious, she observed everything with frightening concentration. "She is going to be just like you," Alexandra said one morning, watching their 2-month-old daughter study a sunbeam crossing the window with fascination. "God help the world," Katerina laughed, exhausted but happy. Alexandra proved to be a devoted father in a way that scandalized even his progressive friends. He held Beatrice, changed her diapers, and woke in the middle of the night to walk with her when she was restless. He completely ignored the social convention that dictated aristocratic fathers barely saw their children. "She is my daughter," he said simply when a visitor commented in surprise. Why wouldn't I care for her? Amelia was in grandmotherly ecstasy. She spent hours telling stories to Beatrice, who obviously didn't understand the words, but seemed to absorb the inflections of her voice, the warmth of her affection. In May, a letter arrived from Mariana. Caterina read it during a rare moment of peace, with Beatrice sleeping in the cradle beside her. Dearest Caterina, congratulations on the arrival of Beatrice. I received your letter announcing her birth, and I cried with joy for you. Here things continue to change. Father is different, quieter, more thoughtful. For the first time in my life, I see him reflecting on his choices. I don't know if it is genuine growth or just a consequence of losing power, but I will watch. As for me, extraordinary news. I have started giving piano lessons to the children of local farmers. The pay is modest but honest, and I have discovered something surprising. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy seeing a child who has never touched an instrument discover melody for the first time. One of my students is the son of a local lawyer, Mr. Fernando Costa. He is a widower with 3 children. He has been coming to pick up his eldest son from lessons, and we talk about music, about books, about life. Caterina, he looks at me as if I am an interesting person, not just a pretty face. It is a strange and wonderful feeling. I don't know where this will lead, but for the first time in my life, I am building something of my own, not to impress society, just for me. With growing love, Mariana. P.S. Cecilia has sent along with this package a small dress she embroidered for Beatrice. I hope you like it. Caterina unfolded the little dress, white cotton with a delicate embroidery of blue flowers around the neckline. Impeccable work. Caterina hardly knew Cecilia embroidered. Families can change, she whispered to the sleeping Beatrice, even when it seems impossible. As Beatrice grew, her personality emerged. At 4 months, she was already laughing with giggles that filled the house with joy. At 5, she discovered her own hands and would spend minutes studying them like fascinating objects. At 6, she began to roll over, exploring the horizontal world. Caterina gradually returned to her activities. She started by visiting the school for short periods. Beatrice strapped to her chest in a cloth sling, a method she had observed working women use, much more practical than leaving a baby alone in a cradle. The children loved it. They wanted to touch the Viscountess's baby, to ask endless questions about her. "Why is she so small?" asked a 5-year-old girl. "Because we all start small," Caterina replied. "You were like this once too. And will she grow up to be big like you?" "She will. And I hope she grows up to be brave too." In the afternoons when Beatrice slept, Caterina resumed her legal work with Alexandra. She discovered that motherhood had not diminished her intellect. It had merely reorganized it. She thought differently now, considering what kind of world she would leave for her daughter. "We need to intensify our abolitionist efforts," she said one afternoon over piles of petitions. "Beatrice will not grow up in a country that enslaves people." "There is movement in Parliament," Alexandra replied. "The Eusebio de Queiroz law should pass this year, banning the international slave trade. It's a start. But we need complete abolition. That will take decades. Then we start now so that our grandchildren may see freedom." He smiled at her, that smile that said he fell in love with her again every day. In August, a significant event, Beatrice's baptism. It was a small ceremony in the plantation chapel. Father Anselmo officiated. Amelia and Josue were chosen as godparents, a scandalous combination, a former slave as the godfather of a little Viscountess, but a perfect one. During the ceremony, when Father Anselmo asked if they renounced evil in all its forms, Alexandra replied clearly, "We renounce it, and we swear to raise this child with a moral conscience that rejects all injustice." It was not the traditional response, but no one protested. After the ceremony, there was a celebration in the garden. Workers, friends, some progressive neighbors. Beatrice, wearing the dress Cecilia had embroidered, was passed from lap to lap like the precious treasure she was. "She will be a great woman," Amelia declared, holding her granddaughter. "I can see it in her eyes. Her mother's determination, her father's integrity. God help the empire when she grows up," Josue joked. "1 Caterina is a revolution. 2 will be a transformation." Everyone laughed, but there was truth in his words. As the sun went down, painting the sky pink and gold, Caterina held Beatrice and looked around, at Alexandra talking animatedly with a lawyer friend, at Amelia laughing with Teresa, at the school children playing with the children of aristocrats, without any awareness of class differences. This was the world they were building, brick by brick, act by act, person by person, and her daughter would grow up knowing that change was possible, that justice was worth any fight, that one person with courage could make a difference. "What are you thinking?" Alexandra asked, coming up behind her and circling them both with his protective arms. "That we are blessed," Katerina replied, "and that we have a responsibility to use our blessings well." Beatrice chose that moment to yawn, stretching her tiny arms in a stretch that made them laugh. "I think someone is tired," Alexandra said. "Someone has had a big day," Katerina agreed. They took their daughter inside together, three temporarily becoming one, united by a love that transcended words. Outside, the stars began to appear. The first was the brightest, the evening star, a guide for lost travelers. Katerina made a silent wish, that her daughter would always find her way, that she would never doubt her worth, that she would be free in ways she herself had taken 20 years to find. And somehow, looking into Beatrice's dark, wise eyes, she knew it would be so. But while peace reigned at Campos Novos, a storm was brewing on the political horizon, and soon everyone would have to choose a side. September 1850, 4 years later, Beatrice was 4 years old and a hurricane in the form of a little girl. Dark hair in rebellious curls that refused to stay tied back, eyes that shone with an insatiable curiosity, a mouth that asked constant questions, some so profound they left adults speechless. "Mama, why doesn't the sky fall down?" she had asked the previous week. "What do you think?" Katerina had replied, the Socratic method she used consistently. I think it's very light, like clouds. Light things float, an excellent theory. What else could we observe to test it?" Conversations like these were common. Beatrice was a child who thought, questioned, challenged, exactly as Katerina had hoped. The girl was also already showing signs of her parents' social conscience. At 3, she had asked why some children at the school had darker skin. "Because God made people in different colors," Katerina had explained, "like flowers in a garden. Imagine if all the flowers were white. Would it be beautiful?" "No, I like the red roses and the yellow sunflowers." "Exactly. People are more beautiful in variety too." "Then why did the grandma who visited last week say it wasn't proper for me to play with Miguel?" Miguel was Josue's son, Black, the same age as Beatrice. Katerina had taken a deep breath. "Because some people haven't yet learned that the color of one's skin doesn't matter. But we are teaching them. Can I help?" "You can. By being Miguel's friend. By treating everyone with kindness. That is a quiet revolution." "What is a revolution?" "A big and important change." "So I'm a revolutionary?" Beatrice liked the word. "Yes, my little one, you are." Much had changed in 4 years. The Eusebio de Queiroz law had passed in 1850, prohibiting the international slave trade. It was a significant victory, but not enough. "Domestic slavery is still legal," Alexandra had said at the abolitionist meeting they now hosted monthly at Campos Novos. "Children are still born in captivity. We need complete abolition." The movement was growing, but slowly. There was fierce resistance from landowners who saw enslaved people as a financial investment, not as human beings. Katerina had become an important voice in the movement, writing articles under the pseudonym Libertas for abolitionist newspapers. Her texts were passionate, logical, impossible to ignore. "How can we call ourselves a Christian nation while we chain the image and likeness of God?" she had written in a recent article. "How can we speak of progress while our progress is built on the whipped backs of human beings?" The articles caused a furor. Conservatives attacked her violently, without knowing she was a woman. Progressives quoted her frequently. In September, an unexpected visitor arrived. Mariana appeared without warning, but this time not in a simple and desperate carriage. In a comfortable carriage, wearing modest but dignified clothing, accompanied by a tall, smiling man and 3 children. "Katerina!" Mariana hugged her sister warmly. "Surprise! Mariana, you look different." And she did. Mariana at 30 possessed a confidence she had never had at 26. She smiled genuinely. She moved with the assurance of a woman who knew her own worth. "I want to introduce my husband, Fernando Costa. Fernando, my sister Katerina, and her husband Alexandre de Albuquerque." Greetings were exchanged. Fernando was a lawyer with a modest but respectable practice. He looked at Mariana with obvious adoration. "And these are my daughters." He indicated 3 girls of varying ages. "Sophia, Anna, and little Clara." "Stepdaughters," Mariana corrected gently. "But as much mine as if I had birthed them." The phrase touched Katerina deeply. "And where is my famous niece?" Mariana asked. "Beatrice, come meet your aunt." Beatrice came running, her simple dress covered in mud from the gardens where she had been exploring. She stopped short at the sight of strangers, a momentary shyness before curiosity won out. "Are you my Aunt Mariana?" she asked. "I am. Mama talks about you sometimes. She says you are learning who you are." Mariana blinked in surprise, then laughed. Your mother is right. And you, who are you? Beatrice considered the question seriously. I am Beatrice Amelia de Albuquerque. I am 4 years old. I like to read books and ask questions and play with Miguel and learn about the stars. And when I grow up, I am going to change the world like Mama and Papa. I am sure you will, Mariana said softly. That night, after the children were asleep, the adults sat on the veranda under the stars. I married 6 months ago, Mariana recounted. Fernando has been a widower for 3 years. When we met while I was giving Sophia piano lessons, he saw me, truly saw me. Not the Baron's daughter, not the pretty face, but the person. And do you love him? Katerina asked. I have learned that love has different forms, Mariana replied thoughtfully. It is not the overwhelming passion of novels. It is comfort, partnership, respect, a silent agreement to build a life together. That is true love, Alexandra said. Passion burns out quickly. Partnership sustains for decades. Fernando nodded. I told Mariana from the beginning, I don't need a perfect wife. I need a real partner. And the girls? Katerina asked. They are wonderful, Mariana smiled. At first they were resentful. They thought I was trying to replace their dead mother. But I was patient. I showed them there was room in the heart to love their mother's memory and to love me too. Now they call me Aunt Mariana, and it is enough. And Father? The Baroness? Mariana's expression tightened slightly. Father is different, older, quieter. Cecilia still lives with them, taking care of the house. She as well, no pretensions of grand marriages, but happy. She embroiders, paints, tends the garden. And our relationship? Cordial, distant. They attended the wedding, were polite, left early. I think Father knows he lost something precious when he rejected you. But pride prevents him from fully admitting it. Katerina nodded. It was what she expected. Have you forgiven them? Mariana asked suddenly. No, Katerina answered honestly. But I have released them. There is a difference. Forgiveness implies reconciliation. I have simply let go of the hurt. For my sake, not theirs. That is wise, Fernando commented. Resentment is a poison we drink, hoping the other person will die. They talked late into the night, sharing stories, laughing, building the bridge that should have always existed between sisters. When Mariana finally retired to bed, she hugged Katerina tightly. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For showing me it was possible to be different. For being brave when I was a coward. For giving me a chance to grow. You did the work, Katerina replied. I just didn't completely close the door. Mariana's visit was just the beginning. The world was changing, and soon everyone would have to decide what role they would play in the coming transformation. December 1850. The year ended with an air thick with possibility and tension. Rumors circulated at court, a political movement that could change everything. A bill was being prepared that would free all children born to enslaved mothers. It wasn't complete abolition, but it was a giant step. Alexandra was summoned to a secret meeting in Rio de Janeiro with other abolitionist lawyers and activists. It was risky. Conservatives were beginning to react violently against the agitators. Don't go, Katerina had said when he told her. Not out of fear of social change, but out of concrete fear for his safety. I must, he had replied. This is our chance. If we can get enough support, they could hurt you. Or worse, he had pulled her close. Remember what you said when you were 13, that some things were simply right regardless of the cost. I was a foolish child. You were a brave child. And you have become an even braver woman. He had kissed her forehead. I have to do this for Beatrice, so she can grow up in a better country. So he had left, leaving Katerina with a gnawing anxiety. 3 days after his departure, the men arrived. There were 10 horsemen dressed in black, their faces partially covered by scarves. They arrived at dawn, while a mist still covered the fields. Josue saw them first and ran to alert the house. Viscountess! Trouble! Katerina was feeding Beatrice. She immediately handed the girl to Teresa. Take her to the cellar. Hide with the other children. Do not come out until I called. Katerina, now. Amelia appeared, her eyes alert. What is happening? I don't know, but it's not good. The men stopped in the front courtyard. Their leader, a large man with a rough voice, shouted, Katerina de Albuquerque, come out. She came out, Amelia at her side, refusing to let her face this alone. Josue stood behind them, his hand resting on a kitchen knife discreetly tucked into his belt. Who are you? Katerina demanded, her voice firm despite the fear coiling in her stomach. We are messengers, the leader replied, from landowners who are tired of abolitionist agitators. Your husband is in Rio causing trouble. Oh, people, he spat the word, Think you can change the natural order? Free property. Destroy the economy. People are not property, Katerina said coldly. Shut up, woman. We came to give a warning. Your husband stops his activities or the consequences will be severe. Empty threats, Amelia intervened, her voice sharp. My son is a Viscount. He has imperial protection. To touch him would be treason. Accidents happen. The man smiled cruelly. Carriages overturn. Houses catch fire. Children get lost. Katerina felt a chill run down her spine as she understood the implication. Beatrice. They were threatening Beatrice. Leave, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Leave now or I will scream, and 50 workers will appear armed with tools that can easily become weapons. We thought the workers were free here, one of the horsemen sneered. What difference does it make? The difference, Josue stepped forward, is that free men fight by choice, not by obligation, and we choose to protect this family. As if summoned, workers began to appear. First 5, then 10, then 20. Men carrying scythes, hoes, shovels. Women with kitchen knives, all positioning themselves between the horsemen and the manor house. The leader looked around, calculating. 10 against 50 were bad odds, even armed. Heed the warning, he finally said. Next time we won't be so gentle. They left in a cloud of dust, leaving the threat hanging in the air like toxic smoke. Katerina waited until they had completely disappeared, before her knees gave way. Amelia and Josue caught her. We must warn Alexandra, Amelia said urgently. I already sent a messenger when I saw them coming, Josue revealed. He should reach him in 2 days. He will come back, Katerina whispered. And when he does, we will have to make a decision. What decision? Whether it is worth continuing. If the risks, her voice broke, if it is worth putting Beatrice in danger. Alexandra returned 3 days later, riding so fast he nearly killed his horse. He found Katerina in the library, Beatrice asleep in her lap, surrounded by books but not reading. Katerina, he pulled her into a desperate hug, careful not to wake their daughter. You are safe, she whispered against his chest. I got the message. I came as fast as I could. That night, after Beatrice was fast asleep in her room, the 3 adults, Katerina, Alexandra, and Amelia, gathered in the office. I need to know, Katerina said. I need to know if it is worth it. If our cause is worth risking our daughter. Alexandra was silent for a long time. Finally, if we stop now, what do we teach Beatrice? That we give up when things get hard? That justice only matters when it's convenient. If we continue and something happens to her. Tears streamed down Katerina's face. How would I live with myself? I don't know, he admitted honestly. I don't have easy answers. Amelia, who had been listening in silence, finally spoke. When Alexandra's father died, he left a letter. It said, live in a way that would make your son proud. Fight for causes that matter. But never ever sacrifice your family on the altar of ideology. So what do we do? Katerina asked. We get smart, Alexandra replied. We don't stop, but we become more cautious. We hire security. We keep Beatrice close. We work more behind the scenes than publicly. And if it's not enough, then we will face it when it comes. Together. Katerina looked at her hands intertwined with Alexandra's. She thought of Beatrice sleeping innocently upstairs. She thought of the children at the school, the families that depended on them, the future they were trying to build. We continue, she decided, but with care. And if at any moment we think Beatrice is in real danger, we retreat. She comes first. Always, Alexandra agreed. But the universe, as it often does, had its own plans. 2 days later, a telegram arrived from the court. Dom Pedro II requested Alexandra's presence for a private consultation regarding a matter of national importance. I'm going with you, Katerina said immediately. Katerina, we are partners. We go together. So leaving Beatrice with Amelia and increased security, they left for Rio de Janeiro, for a meeting that would change everything. The climax approaches. At the Imperial Palace, decisions will be made that will affect not only their lives, but the future of a nation. January 1851. The Palace of San Cristóbal was exactly as Katerina remembered from her childhood, imposing, magnificent, intimidating. But this time she entered not as a displaced girl, but as the Viscountess of Campos Novos, wife of one of the most respected abolitionist lawyers in the empire. They were received in a private salon, not the grand staterooms. Just them, Dom Pedro II, and 2 trusted ministers. The emperor was now 25, tall-bearded, with intelligent eyes that seemed to weigh and measure everything. Viscount of Albuquerque, he greeted, and Viscountess. Thank you for answering my summons, Your Majesty. They both bowed appropriately. You may be seated. What I have to discuss is delicate. When they were settled, the emperor continued. There is a movement in Parliament. A bill that will free all those born to enslaved mothers after a specific date. The law of the free womb. Katerina's heart raced. This was it. This was what they had been fighting for years. But, Dom Pedro continued, there is violent resistance. Landowners are threatening rebellion. Some speak openly of secession, as happened in the United States. What does your Majesty need from us? Alexandra asked. I need reputable abolitionist lawyers to present the case publicly, not as radicals but as rational voices of conscience. I need you to convince the nation that this is morally necessary and economically viable. It is an honor, Alexandra began. But it is also a danger, the Emperor interrupted him. There have already been threats against several activists. I know of the incident at your plantation. If you accept, you will become even greater targets. Katerina and Alexandra exchanged a look, a perfectly synchronized silent conversation. We have a 4-year-old daughter, Katerina said. Beatrice, I know, and I would completely understand if you refused because of her. But, she continued, what kind of country will we leave for Beatrice if we retreat now? What kind of mother will I be if I teach her that justice only matters when it is safe? Dom Pedro smiled slightly. I remember you, Viscountess. Her ball 13 years ago. A brave girl who confronted a marquis for an enslaved boy about to be whipped. I see that courage has not diminished. It has only become more frightened, she admitted. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of it. A wise observation. The Emperor turned to Alexandra. And you, Viscount? We will do this, Alexandra decided. Together. As always. The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Alexandra traveled constantly, presenting arguments in public debates. Katerina wrote incessantly, her articles growing bolder under the pseudonym Libertas. Beatrice, now almost 5, sensed the tension. Mama, why are you always sad? She asked one night during her bath. Not sad, my little one, just worried. About what? How to explain complex issues of morality and politics to a 4-year-old. Remember how we talked about how some people are not free, how they have to work without a choice. Yes, the enslaved. We are trying to change that. But some people don't want change, and they get angry. Will the angry people hurt you? Katerina pulled her daughter close, soaking her own dress with bathwater. Mama and Papa will be safe. We have many people protecting us. I will protect you too, Beatrice declared with all the seriousness of a small child. I know you will, my warrior. In May, the unexpected happened. A letter arrived from Valencia. Not from Mariana, but from the Baron himself. Katerina opened it with trembling hands. Katerina, I write not to ask for anything, but to say something years overdue. I was wrong. When you were a child, I saw your compassionate actions as flaws. I saw your conscience as an embarrassment. I was a moral coward who chose profit over humanity, convenience over courage. You, my rejected daughter, were a better person at 13 than I have ever been, and I live with the weight of that realization every day. I do not ask for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I want you to know, I have freed all the remaining enslaved people on my small estate. Only 12 people, but 12 free people now. Not out of benevolence, but as payment of a moral debt. You taught me, even when I tried to destroy your lessons. Thank you for being brave when I was a coward. Your father, if I can still call myself that, Augusto. Katerina read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it away. What do you think? Alexandra asked. I think people can change. Slowly, painfully, but they can. She looked at him. I will not forgive completely. The hurt was too deep. But I can acknowledge the growth. That is generous. It is real. In September 1851, the law of the free womb was formally presented to Parliament. The debates were fierce. Alexandra testified, presenting legal and moral arguments. Katerina in the gallery watched with her heart pounding violently. Gentlemen of Parliament, Alexandra concluded his testimony, we are not asking for a revolution. We are asking for an evolution. We are asking that this great empire take the first step toward a future where all its citizens are truly free. The vote was close, but it passed. It wasn't complete abolition. That would still take decades, but it was a beginning. After September 28, 1851, no child would be born enslaved in the Empire of Brazil. When the result was announced, Katerina wept. Alexandra held her. All around them, other abolitionists were celebrating. We did it, she whispered. We really did it. You did it, he corrected. Your articles, your courage, your refusal to be silenced. No, we did it, together. Epilogue, December 1851, Christmas Eve at Campos Novos Plantation. The house glowed with candlelight. A decorated tree stood tall with ornaments Beatrice had made, asymmetrical, too colorful, perfect. The scent of French toast and roasted turkey perfumed the air. The family had gathered, not just blood relatives, but chosen family. Alexandre, Caterina, Beatrice. Amelia, now 70, but still as sharp as a razor. Josue and his family. Teresa and Benedita. Professor Joanna. Mariana, Fernando, and the 3 girls. Even Cecilia had come, bringing paintings she had created as gifts. The farm workers were invited to a party in the drying yard, a joint celebration where class did not matter. Beatrice, wearing a red dress Cecilia had sewn, ran among the adults distributing generous hugs. Aunt Amelia, look what I drew. Uncle Josue, come see the stars. Aunt Mariana, can you play the piano later? A child loved by all, unaware that 4 years earlier she had almost not existed. Caterina watched it all from the doorway, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. At 26, pregnant again. The baby would arrive in April. Alexandra came up behind her, circling her with his arms. What are you thinking about? About how strange life is, she replied. My family rejected me, thought they were punishing me, and they gave me everything I ever wanted. Freedom to be yourself, true love, purpose, and family, real, chosen, based on affection, not obligation. From the yard, music began. A guitar, a bass drum, voices singing a Christmas carol with an improvised perfect harmony. Beatrice ran inside. Mama, Papa! They're singing. Let's go. She took both their hands, pulling them outside. And there, under the stars that shone with promise, the family danced. Aristocrats and workers, young and old, all free. Some recently, others for generations, but free. Caterina looked around, at the husband who had chosen her when everyone else rejected her, at the daughter who would grow up knowing her own worth, at the community they had built brick by brick, act of compassion by act of compassion. You know what's ironic? She said to Alexandra. What? My family thought the flaw was the daughter who cared too much, but the real flaw was the heart that cared too little. And now I know I was never a rejected treasure. I was an unrecognized one, until I found someone who knew my value. He spun her in the dance, laughing. And what a treasure you are. When the music ended, everyone applauded. Josue raised a glass of wine, a toast, to the Albuquerque family, who teaches us that revolution begins with compassion, that change begins with courage, that freedom begins with love. To freedom and love, everyone echoed. The children laughed. The adults toasted. The stars bore witness. And somewhere in the vast and mysterious universe, the stories intertwined, of a rejected girl who became an extraordinary woman, of a patient man who waited for true love, of an empire that was slowly learning that all people are born with the same dignity. It would take another 37 years for complete abolition in 1888, but the seeds planted in 1845, watered with tears and courage, blossomed into freedom. And Beatrice, when she grew up, would be there, along with thousands of others who learned that change is possible, that justice is worth any fight, that one person with courage can make a difference. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as rejections. Sometimes one family's trash is another's treasure. And always, it is worth being who you truly are, even when the whole world tells you to be something else. Because in the end, love wins, courage wins, truth wins, and those who are brave enough to be genuine will find their place in the world. Not the place others assign them, but the place they choose to build. Caterina Eugenia, who was rejected for being too much, discovered that being too much for some people means being just enough for the right ones, and that is the greatest victory of all.